Hello everyone. My watch is telling me that it is now shortly after 10 a.m. and that we should get started. So welcome. We are delighted that you could join us for this webinar. My name is Beatrice Dupuy and I'm one of the co-directors of Circle. Joining me today are Kate Mackay, Circle's Associate Director, and Xochitl Coronado Vargas, Circle's Outreach Coordinator. Before we start with today's webinar, I have a few announcements I would like to make. But first, let me give you some information about Circle. Circle is housed in the College of Humanities at the University of Arizona and is one of 16 language resource centers funded by the U.S. Department of Education. On this slide, you have the link to Circle's website and the link to the Language Resource Center's general website, where you can find out about the work we all do and access our free resources. Our last webinar for this academic year will be held on June 19th and will focus on socio-scientific issues in the language classroom. It is one of Circle's projects, and the project team will be presenting the result of their work, focusing particularly on the instructional resources that they have created. We've also started working on our lineup of webinar series for fall, and our first series will focus on AI, artificial intelligence, and the language classroom. So please save the date and more details will be coming in August. The theme of our upcoming 8th Intercultural Competence Conference, which will be held in late January 2022, is Decentering Mobility in Intercultural Education, Engagement, Equity, and Access. Our lineup of outstanding plenary speakers here appear on this slide. And we recently extended the call for proposal to June 21st. So there is still plenty of time for anyone interested in submitting an abstract. And you can find additional information at icc.arizona.edu. The presenters of today's webinar are the following. Dr. Adriana Picoral, an assistant professor of data science in the University of Arizona School of Information, and an affiliated faculty member in the Interdisciplinary Graduate Program of Second Language Acquisition and Teaching, SLAT, also at the University of Arizona. Our research draws from corpus and computational linguistics to shed light on multilingual language use, acquisition, and development. Mariana Centanin-Bertho is a Ph.D. student in Second Language Acquisition and Teaching at the University of Arizona, where she teaches Portuguese. Her research interests include phonological acquisition of second and third languages, bilingual speech, learner corpora, and data-driven language learning. Dr. Shelley Staples, an associate professor of English, Applied Linguistics, and Second Language Acquisition and Teaching at the University of Arizona. Her research focuses on corpus-based analysis and pedagogy, and her research has appeared in Journal of English for academic purposes, English for specific purposes, Applied Linguistics, Modern Language Journal, and TESOL Quarterly. Dr. Bruna Sommer-Farias, an assistant professor in the Master of Arts in Foreign Language Teaching program at Michigan State University. Her research focuses on genre and corpus-based pedagogy, multilingual genre learning, and world language teacher education. And Dr. Aleksey Novikov, his academic interests include register variation, L2 Russian syntactic and morphological complexity development, corpus-informed pedagogy, data-driven learning, and task-based language teaching. So without further ado, I now leave the virtual floor to the MACAWS team, whose webinar is entitled Soaring Higher with MACAWS, Integrating IDDL and Other Web Applications to Enhance Language Learning. The floor is yours.
Yeah, as Beatrice already mentioned, our topic today is Soaring Higher with MACAWS, Integrating IDDL with Other Web Applications to Enhance Language Learning. So, and I know there's a lot packed in there, so in the next few slides, I'm going to unravel some of these terms for you. And for those of you who are not familiar with MACAWS, MACAWS, I mean, they are birds, but it's also a corpus. It's a multilingual academic corpus of assignments, writing and speech. And it's as rare as the birds. So, all right, so corpora and corpus-based pedagogy. So what is a corpus? If you're not familiar with what a corpus is, but you might know the plural of corpus is corpora. Corpus is a collection of texts, and they can be both written and spoken. And also it's a principled collection. So it's collected in a systematic way. So it's representative of a particular domain or language use. So corpus is, corpora are usually balanced across registers and genres, so different types of texts. So, and our corpus is a learner corpus. So, and what that means is that it's a corpus of learner productions. So in our case, it's different assignments that students performed in their language classes. And in our case, it's Portuguese and Russian. So, and here today, we're going to focus on corpus-based pedagogy. So using corpora for teaching purposes. And corpus can be used to inform curriculum. Corpus can be used for creating materials. And also, you can use corpus directly with the students to engage them in the process of pattern recognition. All right. So some of you might have attended our previous workshop, and here's the link for that. And if you have not attended it, I will give you a brief introduction of the concepts that we talked about in that workshop, specifically corpus-based pedagogy. All right, so in our presentation, we'll be using what's called a data-driven learning approach, or DDL. And what DDL is, and you can see in the bottom right corner, an example of concordance lines. So concordance lines, as you can see, are lines of text. And there is a word in the middle that's highlighted. In the corpus jargon, it's called quick, or keyword in context. And the main goal of DDL approach is pattern recognition or pattern noticing. So it's engaging students to look at language as data. The main pedagogical approach that data-driven learning uses is an inductive approach. So students are given some data in the form of concordance lines, and they are scaffolded to, they're guided, they're prompted to notice patterns in the data and come up with some insights about it. All right, and usually data-driven learning is based on, those concordance lines are based on authentic examples of language use. And in our case, it's the learner corpus data. So it's the data, it's the language that was produced by learners naturalistically in the classrooms for the languages that they were taking. So, and more specifically, we will be talking about interactive data-driven learning today. So interactive data-driven learning, or what we call it IDDL or IDLE sometimes, it's basically, it's still data-driven learning, but the difference is that the concordance lines, and you can't see it here, but you'll eventually be able to see it today, they are interactive, they're dynamic. So you can scroll up and down. You can also sort by words to the left and to the right. And you can also embed those concordance lines, or what we call concordance line boxes, to course management systems or to websites such as Google sites. And we see this, our team has come up with this sort of interactive aspect of DDL, and we've incorporated it into into our Corpus platform that we'll be sharing with you today. And one of the main advantages, in my opinion, is that you can kind of, instead of overwhelming students with a corpus, you can embed this concordance boxes, which are up to 20 concordance lines, into the materials, into the pedagogical materials themselves, to help learners to interact with the corpus in a friendlier way. All right, and now I give the floor to our next presenter.
Thank you, Alex. So the two learner corpora you will have access in the demonstration part of this presentation are MACAWS, the multilingual academic corpus of assignments, writing and speech, which is currently available with Portuguese and Russian learner data, and CRO, the corpus and repository of writing that is composed of English learners' writing data. So you can choose the one that better suits your teaching context to follow along with the presentation. Then I would like to show you the MACAWS interface. So this is what the MACAWS interface look like. You can search the corpus. We also have a part where you can access our resources and tutorials and materials that we have in our blog, and also a part where we list the events that we have been presenting about the corpus, about MACAWS, and the pedagogical and research applications. There's also a table that I'd like to show you the data that we currently have in MACAWS. So here you can see that currently the languages that we have are Russian and Portuguese. We do have assignments in writing and speech mode, but up to this point, we only have spoken data in Russian. Portuguese, it's still coming. And this is the number of students, text, words that we have currently in the corpus. Just for you to know, CRO interface is the same. It looks the same as MACAWS, so you have the same features. And today you will have access to search in CRO as well, if you want to perform searches in English. Okay, so now we're gonna start our demonstration and you will have access to the corpus. So I'll give the floor to Adriana.
Thank you. Yeah, so these are basically the 5 steps or the 5 stages of demonstration we're going to go through with you today. And starting on step 2, we do want you to follow along. We're going to give instructions on how to log into either MACAWS or CRO if you're interested in English or Portuguese and Russian. So we're first doing, Alex is going to do a learning activity demonstration for you to get an idea of what our activities look like, and then we're going to search the corpus. And then Bruna is going to show you how to create a Google site, and based on the searches you did in the corpus, add embedding code for the IDDL. And then finally, Bruna is going to show you how to insert a collaborative platform for student production into the Google Sites. So let me show you what an activity looks like in the next slide. So this will be like the final product with the different elements on Google Slides. So at the top, you can see what Alex was talking about related to the IDDL, the concordance lines. This is the embedding part where you get from our platform. So this is all in Google Sites, right? So the corpus input is interactive concordance lines. The idea is to have these target phrases highlighted, and you can sort by context before and after. And then because you're on Google Sites, you can add questions and text and instructions to students. So on the middle there, you have the interpretation questions that we usually add to our activities, with questions to guide the pattern noticing that they can find in those concordance lines. And finally, at the bottom, you have the practice activity where students, we usually like to give them an opportunity to produce language in a collaborative way. So right there, you see a Google Doc embedding. So I'm gonna pass the floor back to Alex. He's gonna start with showing you the activities that we have for you as an example for the 3 languages.
All right, so we'll start with just kind of showcasing the 3 different activities for the 3 different languages, so Portuguese, Russian, and English. And then I will show you how to perform the searches in both corpora, in MACAWS and CRO, based on the search words and phrases used in the activities that I will present. All right, so this is our website where we host different activities that we created, and also give updates on what we've been doing. So first of all, I'll start with the Portuguese activity over here. So and we'll kind of I'll walk you through the activities and the 3 elements that Adriana mentioned. So again, corpus input, interpretation questions, and practice activity. So as you can see here, we have the concordance lines, and now you can see that they are interactive, right? So you can scroll and also sort by words before and after. And as you can see, this website is not the Corpus site. It's just a Google site. So this concordance box comes from the Corpus, so it's embedded. All right, so this is the Corpus input part of the activity, and then we have some questions, some guiding questions for the learners based on the Corpus input over here, and then also a practice activity where they can use what they've just learned. So collaboratively here in the Google Doc. And also there's a couple more activities where, this is an activity where, they have to add a sticky note and answer questions. And also a Padlet where they also discover different meanings that they've just induced from the data. The next activity is the activity in Russian. So here we also have the 3 elements. So we have the concordance lines. So here there are 2 concordance lines. One is they're both for the verb to study, but they're different, the different verbs to study in Russian. So, and learners are instructed to notice patterns about the difference in these verbs. They're instructed to look at the context and see if they can figure out a pattern. And then they're asked questions, the guiding questions, and then the Padlet is the place where they interact with the data and answer the questions. And in some of the activities in the past, we've also added things like flip grids and other technology to make it more interactive, where students actually produce some kind of text based on what they've just learned. And then here's the activity in English. It looks a little different. It's on our writecrow.org, so it's also available, but it's a different site. So MACAWS and CRO are different projects, even though they are interconnected. So here we have the corpus input, and here the corpus input comes in 2 different modes. So here we have the frequency table from the corpus, and then sorry, scrolling too fast. We also have what we've been calling CRO concordance lines. So those are sentences from the corpus with the data. And then down below, we have the concordance lines, as you saw in the previous activities as well. So, and then questions, again, to guide the students, and students then use the knowledge that they've just acquired to practice. All right, so now I'm gonna show you how to perform these searches on the interface. So we'll start with MACAWS. So I'll go back to, I'm gonna provide you with access to the corpus, and you can follow along with me as I'm performing the searches for the languages that you would like. So choose a corpus. So MACAWS, again, is Russian and Portuguese, and CRO is English. So choose the corpus you would like to work with, and I'll walk through the searches in all of them. Okay, I'm going to start navigating to the corpus. So we will start with MACAWS, and here's the website. So it's macaws.corporaproject.org. So, and you've been provided a code. Okay, so I'm already signed in. So when you click search corpus, you should be prompted to enter your login and password information, which I already have. So we'll start with Portuguese. I don't speak Portuguese, so I'm just going to copy and paste the searches for the activities that I have. So you would put the search words in the search bar over here. So I'm just going to copy and paste them. And notice how here the searches are very specific. So, and they are between quotation marks. So what this means is that if you're searching for a phrase, for a certain phrase, you need to put it inside quotation marks, because otherwise, if you don't use the quotation marks, it's going to search each word individually. So here we're interested in 4 different phrases. And I think they mean something like makes me happy, makes me nervous. All right, so you can choose Russian and Portuguese here. If you don't, it'll search the whole corpus, and maybe some Russian learners use those phrases in their writing or speaking as well. So that would be fun to see. But after you've done that, you click search. Okay, great. So make sure that you use the quotation marks from the search bar here. So just input them from here, because they are different, and you might not know, but quotation marks, can look differently, right? And then there are different symbols. So it's important to use the ones directly on the interface. So here we see the concordance lines. And then Bruna will walk you through the steps of how to embed the concordance lines. So you'll learn that skill. All right, so Russian, and for Russian, I don't have to copy and paste because I speak Russian. So, all right, and the search words were изучаю, and already, oops, изучаю и учусь. And here I'm not using quotation marks because those are the 2 different words that I'm searching for. And actually the way it's done in the activity, I searched for изучаю first and then учусь. So I searched for them separately, but for the sake of the demonstration, I'll do it together. So here you can see there are 90 instances of изучаю and 123 instances of учусь. And also, if you want to use more forms, right, with verb conjugations, you can just put in, type them in here. Okay, so are we ready to switch gears to CRO? Right, so there's the CRO corpus, and the search that it looks very similar, right? The interfaces are very similar, so it's easy to navigate. If you're familiar with one, you can use the other pretty easily. So in the search that I'm going to do is such as, and again, this needs to be in quotation marks because it's 2 words, right? Otherwise, it will search for such and as separate words. Okay. And also, as you might have noticed, we have the filters on the left, and you can make your search more specific. For example, you want such as only in certain assignments, only in argumentative papers, right? And it will search that. It will filter the results by whatever you want it to be. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And then Bruna will continue with more demonstration.
Great, Alex. Thank you so much. I think since we are getting many questions, we thought it would be interesting if we go over some of them before we move to the demonstration, just to make sure we are all on the same page, right, Shelley?
Great. Yeah, so we had a couple of questions. Lauren asks, are the answers from students in the interactive portions, so the Google Docs and the Padlets, visible to students in different classes? So will teacher A's students' answers be visible to teacher B's students? And I know Bruna and Mariana have both addressed this before. Do you want to answer that, one of you?
Yes. So Lauren, I think you were referring to the activities that we have in our learning system at the University of Arizona, right? The activities we have in the Portuguese program. So they will be if you use the same Google Doc. For example, we do have MACAWS planned activities that are available for instructors to incorporate in their courses. And those activities, they were planned with one Google Doc that was set up by the teacher that designed the activity at that moment. If you use the same Google Doc, the same Padlet, the answers will be there from the previous students. But as you're going to learn today, if you embed another Google Doc, and you can do that, you can change it. And then it can be a Google Doc of your own, a Padlet of your own, and then only you and your students will have access to that. But for the activities that we have already designed in our D12 MACAWS site, if you use the way that they are there, then it's the Google Doc that it was first embedded by the instructor that designed that activity. And then there are already answers there, which is not a problem. You can keep collecting answers in the same document, or if you want to have something separate, you can embed your own document, as we're going to show today. Thank you for your question. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, I was just going to also add to what Mariana was saying, that this is what Alex was just showing you all. And that's what we are demonstrating how to do today. So this is a public website. We are going to go over how to create a Google site. So if you embed the activities in the form of a Google Doc, like the one that we have here, right, this one. So if the students type in this document, everyone can see it, and you have to set the privacy settings so that everybody can see it. And you can restrict the access, but since this is a public website, probably it's going to be open to everyone, but it depends on how you're going to share your websites and your activities. So you are able to set the privacy to specific students only if you want.
Yeah, it looks like she was happy with the answer. So yeah, there's some question about access to the sites. So I just put the access information for this webinar in the chat again. So hopefully you got that information. What we would ask is if you are interested in using this, either with other teachers in your programs or with students, that you would actually go to our website and request another account. So this account that we've set up for the webinar won't last forever. We wanted it to make sure that you could have access, but usually what we do is we ask users to sign up for an account. It's completely free. It's always free. But we do want to know who's using the site and how they're using the site. So that's the reason for that. And then the other thing is, if you're thinking about using this with students, what we usually suggest, we actually have two different views. And the view that you're seeing today is just an excerpted view. So they're just seeing excerpts. You're just seeing excerpts of the texts. We actually have a full text view as well. And as teachers, you are welcome to request access for that. That can be helpful. Let's say you want to work with a full text and create materials from a full text. That is completely fine. What we usually say is for students, we think it's helpful to start with that excerpted view. And so that's the level of the account that we would use with students. So I think that answers that question. And then we also have some questions about other languages. We would love to include other languages. So if people are interested in, joining the project, if you're interested in collecting data, maybe from your own language program, please do contact us. We do have a lot of resources to help people to build corpora. And so that is something that is available through our broader team. But right now we have the Portuguese and Russian and English. And then maybe to answer, I know Julio had a question about translation. Maybe if we want to describe just a little bit more about what these texts are, that might help answer that question.
Yes, sure. So we went over the corpus design in a previous webinar. So if you want a complete description of what the corpus is about, you can also go into Circle's website. There's a link to the full explanation there. But in a nutshell, what these are texts produced by the students who are taking these classes as a second or a third language at the University of Arizona. So the Portuguese assignments and the Portuguese texts that you have access to, they were all produced as assignments in the Portuguese program. The same with the Russian and the same with the English. So the English assignments, for example, they are not translations from Portuguese or Russian in Portuguese, they are not translation necessarily from an English assignment. They were the ones produced by each level at the university. So you can see that in the corpus, we have a filter and you can search by the specific course that the students were taking at that moment and when those assignments were produced. So it's by specific level and they are divided by the types of assignments that they created. For example, if they wrote a trip report, if they wrote a biography, those are the types of assignments that they wrote based on, of course, all the instruction that they got in each program. That's more or less what they are in a nutshell. I don't know if that answers your question, Julio, but just a suggestion, you can also check out the previous webinar. It's all recorded and available on YouTube and Circle's website.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruna. So maybe we'll take this one more question and then we'll actually go on to the second part of the demo. This is from Aziz. Hi, Aziz. Thank you so much for this question. So the question is a question about MACAWS. Is the goal of IDDL activities for language students to figure out patterns about the language they are learning? Is it for teachers to reveal patterns in learner language use? And then a quick look at some language samples in MACAWS corpus suggests that some of the lexicogrammatical patterns are very much in the early stages of development. What's your take on language learners who might be exposed to a pattern they might consider to be established when it isn't? These are all really great questions. So I don't know who wants to start us off.
I guess I can start by answering one of the first questions. If it's for language students to figure out patterns, or is it for teachers to review patterns in learner language use? So both. So that's why we have different modes for your user for MACAWS and Crow. So you can have like just excerpts or the whole text for the whole text, for example, when you use the platform for searches, usually we give that access to teachers, instructors only. So we've heard from during our workshops with training teachers, instructors to use the platforms for corpus searches. We've heard that it's very hard sometimes to teach. You don't have time in class to teach students how to use the corpus platform. Although we did design our corpus platform to be accessible to students and teachers, it's not a research platform, but it still takes time. But if the instructor has time to actually teach students how to access the corpus and do the searches directly on the corpus and find the patterns, great, right? So we did some training for that. But then that's where IDDL came from, the idea that it's maybe too much to do that in the classroom for just one, like for, like first semester Portuguese, right? So then teachers, instructors can actually find the patterns and manipulate the patterns. And Bruna is going to show you a little bit on how to do that. And Alex showed you also to actually create materials so that students can notice those patterns. So basically both. You can have students access directly the corpus platform, and you can have teachers use the embeddings for classroom materials.
Thank you, Aziz, for your question. I just would like to add, I like that you mentioned that students are in the early stages of development. So you're not saying that they commit errors, but you're acknowledging that it's a development process, right? So what's our take on language learners who might be exposed to maybe possible errors that are in the assignments, because we don't edit anything. It's really the assignments that the students produced. And what we want to show you here with the demonstration soon is that what we also aim with these activities is to raise the students' language awareness and critical language awareness. So the way that we design the tasks based on the data that we get from the concordance lines matter a lot. So you'll see that many times there will be one concordance line showing a different pattern. So we can draw students' attention to that line and ask them, why is this happening? Which one would be more appropriate, less appropriate, and in which situation and why? So that's why we are also reinforcing the idea of task design as something very important, so that students know how to encounter those authentic productions, because they are all authentic, and they are able to develop that sense of, okay, I know that this is not something that may be correct, or something here is not as I think it should be, or it's different from what I was taught in my course, so they can exert that flexibility when they work with language as well. So it's what we are aiming at here too.
And also maybe it is like there is repeated vocabulary and repeated structures, because these, of course, these assignments, especially for the Portuguese and the Russian courses, which are language classes, right, as opposed to CRO, which is like writing, academic writing. So they match with what they're learning, which is really helpful as an instructor to have that vocabulary there, because if I use something like Corpus do Portuguese, which is the BYU Portuguese version of COCA, it's a lot for students, it's overwhelming, right? So having actually corpus data at the level or a little above, because you can use like, you know, the following course data as well, is really helpful in my opinion for not overwhelming students with a lot of words they don't know.
And just one little note that I wanted to add is, I think we're also working against the deficit hypothesis here, and you know, trying to legitimize the learner variety. And as you said, you know, the looking at learner languages development, and you know, not trying to set the, you know, the native speaker standard, but you know, look at learn a language as a legitimate variety that they're using in, you know, every day. So,
and also those skills that we are aiming to develop with students, where they're looking at this data, can be applied to any other type of language excerpts, right? So the biggest corpus we have is the web, and people type things on Google all the time to resolve their questions about language or about something else. And it's not because it's there that you completely trust and copy and paste what's there, right? So we can also discuss that. The language, there are many like varieties of language and context and genres and types of text. And so the skills that they are developing in working with this kind of data can be applied with other kind of data that they're gonna find everywhere when they're learning language and being exposed to language. So I think that's really helpful too. So it's not a deficit thing of the learner, but it's you don't copy and paste language from Twitter to your essay assignment, for example. You adapt, you critically think about that language sample that you have there, if that's appropriate for what you were trying to achieve. So I think it's that's the rationale that we think behind this.
Thank you all. Those were great answers. I don't have anything to add. Okay, so we'll now go back to our demonstration so you can see how you can actually make the materials.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I'm going to go over each step, the steps that you need in order to create one activity, just like the one that Alex walked you over a few minutes earlier. And I just want to emphasize that we did share the slides that we are using here with you. So in the slides, you find the step-by-step of each one of these. So you don't have to rush or take notes or anything. Later on, you will have everything in the slides that we shared. Okay, so I'm going to start with Google Sites. And this is one possibility. There are many websites out there, but this is a good start for us. You can type then sites.google.com, and this is what you're going to see. If you have other websites, they're going to show up down here, but you can go ahead and click on blank, and you're going to have a whole new page for you to play with. And this is what you see. It should be intuitive. it's not always that intuitive. So you can start with your title page right here. You can type, for example, Portuguese activity, just an example. And then the one that we shared with you was about the verb ficar, which means to stay or to get or so many other things. So this is where you're going to work with the activity. That's where it's going to show up. So you see that here you have 3 tabs on the right, 3 types of tabs, and you can click on embed when you are going to paste your URL right there. And here is where you add new pages. So if you right click on these 3 dots, you're going to have a sub page. For example, let's say that you want to have many activities. So let's call this activity 1. And then you're done. And then you have a sub tab here. That's where you're going to have your whole activity hosted. So let's go to MACAWS website and let's generate those concordance lines and start with those. So let me drop and open MACAWS website here. You go to macaws.corporaproject.org. You sign in with the password and username that we just shared with you guys. And then here you click on search corpus. And then you have to be patient with your internet. There you go. So this is the search box that Alex already showed you, and I'm going to paste again. These are some searches, but you can search anything you like. And here on the left, that's where you see the filters I mentioned earlier. If you want to just look at courses of a specific level, you can select those filters right there. We also have macro genres. If you just want to generate and gather data from description type of texts or evaluation type of texts, you can also check these boxes on the left. Same with topics. We classified the text into topics, so you can also see here the numbers of texts on that topic. For example, art, you can select that. And draft, if you want final, first or second drafts, or mode of assignment. These are just writing. And then the L1s here as well. So feel free to do that. And once you click on search, you can see down here all the concordance lines. In order to embed, you're going to find this little button here. It's along, you find this along with this table with all the metadata, all the numbers about that metadata. So you just click on embed and you'll see this box popping up, and you simply copy to clipboard. And then we're going to go back to our Google site.
Sorry, Bruna. Can I interrupt you?
Please.
Can you go back to the MACAWS website? Because you copy and pasted, the quotes are curly. So the search is not working. And that's an issue people might, I'm interrupting because that's an issue that is very common. So you have to change the quotes. Yeah.
Let's search only for Fico Feliz and see what happens.
You can search for all of them. It's just the problem was that maybe you have to click reset now because you may have some filters.
Yes, clicking on reset is a great suggestion. Sometimes you click on something here on the left on the filters and we don't realize that this is working a little bit differently than we would like. Okay, so now it worked. We have I get happy. That's what Fico Feliz means, Alex. He was asking us earlier. So now we are ready to click on embed and copy to clipboard. And then we are going to go back to our Google site. So notice that in this first tab, insert, you find the embed button. And notice that you have 2 options here. You can embed from the web using a code that is an URL or an actual code such as the one that MACAWS website just generated. So you want to choose the second option, embed code. And when you click next, that's when the magic happens. You click insert and you are able to see that on your page. So you see why we had many options for the search, because the Fico Feliz we have 4 instances, but it's okay. It's just an example now. Okay, so this is what this is going to look like. We are not able to interact with this interactive data-driven learning box. In order to do that, you need to click on preview. Preview is going to show you how this is going to look like on the website. Okay, this is how it's going to look like. It's working, it's interactive. So we go back to our page. If you want to include the questions, then you are going to click on text box, also under the insert tab, and then you can type your questions. Just an example here. And if you remember, the Crow website had a very nice design. MACAWS website has a more clean design, and you can play with that too. Use your web design skills. On the left, you can change the color, give emphasis to the questions. You can play with that. Okay, but this is how you do it. You click on the text box button here. And then later on, we want to have our students interacting with this data even more. We want to see how they can work collaboratively. So we also chose Google Docs as one of the platforms that allows us to do that. So I already opened Google Docs right here. You can type docs.google.com and you see it's a similar layout. You click on blank, and that's where you build your activity. If you noticed previously, we chose to do that through a table. So students would have to complete the table with their answers, but you can come up with any type of activity here. If you want them to include pictures, if you want them to draw things, or if you want to make a mind map in the Google Doc, that's just the platform where you host any type of activity you'd like them to complete. So once you have decided what you want to work on, once you have your table, your activity, your mind map ready, you are going to click on share on the upper right again. And here, that's where you are going to be able to select the type of privacy you want. If you want everybody on the web to access this document, or if you want only people at your school to access it, you can change this under Get Link. These are all the options that you're going to find. Restricted, maybe here you'll have your institution or not, or anyone with the link. This is an option too. And then you can also choose here if you want the students to edit, if you want them to comment, or simply view whatever you include in this document. So if you want them to collaborate, you want to make them editors as well. And then that's how you are going to go and find this copy link, and you're going to copy the link. And then we are going to go back to our website and choose Embed again. But instead of using the embed code option, we are going to use the by URL option, because that's what the Google Docs generated. Okay, you already see a preview right here. And then we are going to insert. And that's where you find, again, the Google Docs. Okay. This is one option, guys, but similarly, Google Forms works well as well. If you want to have all the questions in a Google Forms, that's possible. Or if you want a Jamboard, that's the other option that Alex showed us. That's also a similar way of embedding. You're going to use this embed button for everything. Okay. Another option is also Padlet. And I just want to click on preview here before we move on. So you see, this is how it's looking like. We have activity 1, we have the concordance lines, and then we have the questions and the collaborative Google Docs. Unfortunately, we are not able to type directly from the website. Previously, this was possible. So students did not need to go to the Google Docs website in order to actually type in the document. And now it seems like they have to click on this arrow here, and then they are going to be able to interact with the document. But still, it's a way to keep everything on the same website, on the same page, and you have the final product here on the same space. Okay, so just one option that actually allows you to collaborate on the platform and on that document from the Google site without making you go to another website is Padlet, but this one is not free, and we wanted to show you options of platforms that were free. And this is the Padlet. So you can make a Padlet. They have actually 5 types of boards that are free, the number actually that are free. This is one example. And then when you embed, it's going to allow your students to interact directly on Padlet. You click on share. I just want to show you this very quickly. And there's the embed in your blog or website. And if you go into the Google site, it's the same procedure. You go insert, embed. Since this is an embedding code, it's long, you see, you are going to insert it here. So it's going to show up the same way. And then you can resize it the way that you think looks nicer on your website. So this is another platform. Okay. So I think we can take questions from you guys from here on, because I know this is a lot of information. So depending on what you want to ask, we can go back, we can review the steps, and thank you very much.
There is a question in the chat.
Yeah, about Jamboard. Maybe if some of you can share this screen. Bruna, can you share this screen and go back to our demonstration activity about Picoral? So Michelle, what happens with Jamboard is that Google site does not allow for you to actually embed the activity. But what you can do is refer to the link so students can open in a different tab and then do the activity there. But then it doesn't show, it doesn't display as Google Doc. But we do have an example here that we can show you. So what I did there to have a little bit of the experience of the Jamboard was to take a screenshot of how the board looks like and then refer to the link. But then people have to open the link to see how the board looks like. It's not going to display on the site. So that's one limitation of Jamboard. But because it's free and it has pretty much like the same display and functionalities as Padlet, it may be an option. So this, what Bruna is showing you is the part that you can see. It's an actually, it's an image that I uploaded. So I took a screenshot and uploaded as an image, or I downloaded the board as an image and uploaded. But then I referred to the link where I say, click here to access them, and now they can add it. But it's an external link.
So yeah, and Alma is asking the question, I think, to clarify the difference. When you embed from Padlet, can students then type the answers in the Google site?
Yes, yeah, we can demonstrate that. So you can see that with Padlet, you can actually work on the board from the website.
And just to clarify, these are restrictions for each of these external tools, right? So some of them are going to allow the students to type directly in the embedding. Some will require students to click and open other page. So you have like to test different tools and see which ones work better for your case.
Yeah, which is nice is that either way you can keep the order and the flow of the activity in one page, but then editing may require open an external link.
Yes, exactly. So just to show you, this is the published website. This is our MACAWS blog, and you guys have access to this blog. You can go into this page and play with it. But let me just show you again, just to demonstrate what Adriana and Mariana was telling you. If the students go into this page, they are able to move the screen. They are able to sort the word by the word before or after. So the concordance lines are interactive this way. But if you scroll down, you just see the Google Doc. You see that I'm not able to type in here. And unfortunately, that's the feature that we wish were still available. It's not. So I'm just able to type in here if I click on this arrow, and then it's going to redirect me to the Google Docs website. If you scroll down, you see the example with the Google Jamboard. And as Mariana was saying, this is a screenshot of the board she created for this activity. And what it says here, it's click on the link to open a Jamboard page to answer the questions. So if you click on here, we are going to open this link, and then you'll see the Jamboard, and students can all go in here and they can interact. And then once this page is updated, it's going to show, well, no, it's not going to show because it's not directly linked. This is just a screenshot. But in the case of Google Docs, all the answers that students typed are going to show on this page, which is a nice collaboration feature. If you go back later, it's going to be all in here. But what is nice about Padlet is that they don't need to go to another page. As I was demonstrating to you earlier, they just click on this plus button and they can answer. They can type here. This is a new stick note, for example, sticky note. Nice activity. I type from here. You see that I don't have to leave the website for that.
So those are restrictions depending on the affordance. If this kind of thing is new to you, I think the key thing to remember is URL links and embedding code are different things. So always check if you can get an embedding. It's with embedding codes that you can display things on the site. But then if the tool doesn't afford that, then you can always link the URL link, but then it's going to open an external tab. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind. You cannot, for example, yeah.
Yeah, and then what I wanted to say is like we're demonstrating here on Google Sites, but most learning management systems allow for embedding. So you can ask if you don't know exactly how to do in your specific learning management system, you can ask your IT department, but it's possible to embed. We do that with D12 for all of our courses. Actually, we embed all of these in D12.
Yes, Michelle, Google Form can be embedded and it shows on the site.
Again, it's the share button at the top, and then you can choose the embedding. It's usually represented by the angle brackets, the embedding code.
And we have another question from Ellen. Ellen, thank you so much for your question. Yes, that's great. We've talked before. Ellen does great research on Portuguese as well in Brazil. And for her research, she transcribed all authentic text used in this Brazilian proficiency test of Portuguese as an additional language. So she has a huge amount of text, 90 spoken and 90 written text. So of course, we want to talk to you more about that, Helen. We would love to be able to include your text in the project. So let's keep talking for sure. We did collect spoken texts for MACAWS Portuguese as well. We are just in the process of working on that. Mariana is processing all those texts, so we are going to be including more soon, and more texts in general too for Russian and Portuguese. But we are interested in other languages for sure, just like Shelley mentioned earlier. If anyone is interested, you can reach out to us.
And then Mohammed had a couple of questions about, again, access. So again, just what I would suggest, if somebody else is interested, just direct them to the website, macaws.corporaproject.org, and then they will be able to, it will direct you to a form where you basically fill out an application, and we approve your access to it. For building the corpora, so we have a project that is still in progress, but we're hoping to release an initial version of it later this summer. We call it Ciabatta because we love playing around with names. So it's Corpus in a Box, applications, tools, training, and advising. I think that's the last day. But we have so that project is hosted by GitHub. This is a site, if you're familiar with coding and programming, that you might be familiar with. If not, what we've done is we've created a wiki there that eventually will have each of the steps to build a corpus, starting with, do you really need to build a corpus? Because maybe there's a corpus out there that you can use already. It is a lot of work to build a corpus. We can attest to that. But it can be very worthwhile, especially, for these more specialized, both domains and also languages where there's just not a lot of resources available right now. So I've put the link to that wiki in the chat, and look for updates on that. And our intention is to have it as a kind of tool for people to walk through the corpus building process.
Yeah, Michelle made a comment about it must be very time consuming. It is time consuming to build a corpus. But we did, like Shelley mentioned, we are documenting all the steps and all the scripts. We did automate a lot of the steps, like we make sure that there is no identifiable information in the text, like they're publicly shared. Student names and their family names, they cannot be shown. So we do have tools for the process of making sure that things are de-identified, for example. But that's one piece in the workflow, in the pipeline. But you can find more about that in the link Shelley shared.
Yes, and I want to reiterate what Kate put in the chat, that this is possible because we had funding from Circle. So that's another thing to think about if you're thinking about building a corpus, that yes, you'll want to have some funding just because it is time consuming. And we are grateful for the support from both Circle and from the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences for this. And then Crow is funded by a few different grants. We received a Mellon Foundation grant and also a grant from the American Council of Learned Societies, ACLS. So yeah, we wouldn't be able to do this without that funding.
I just want to once more reiterate, emphasize that we have on our blog many other examples of activities. So if you have access to the main corpus right here, macawsproject.org, you have the resources and tutorials down here, and that's where you go straight from there to our blog. And there are many activities, other webinars that we have hosted before, workshop materials, including this one, this webinar one, and we keep updating this with news. So that's where it's an easy access to everything.
And then Mohammed actually had a follow-up question about the size of the corpus. So one thing that I always like to tell teachers is that, yeah, you don't need to have such an ambitious project where you're trying to collect from so many classes. Using your own text from your own students is a way to, kind of add to what maybe you're finding in MACAWS or in Crow, and then looking at what your students are doing. There are a lot of, so again, we have tools available that you could use to get your texts, your student texts, into a format that would allow you to then look at them using other corpus tools. There's a lot of available corpus tools where you can do things like looking at the keywords in context and seeing what your students are doing, maybe comparing them to what's going on in MACAWS or Crow. So if you want to see what your students are doing, it can be, pretty manageable if you're just taking the text from your own classroom. So I think we have a couple of actually additional searches if you want to try, just to get your feet wet a little bit more with the corpora of your choice. So we'll share that slide. And if you want to follow along, of course, you can do any search that you want in the corpora, but here are some examples of searches that we've done to create activities for the different languages. So you can practice these searches in the corpora. And then I think a really important thing to think about is how are you going to use this? And so one thing to start with is, what questions might you ask students to answer about these, the patterns that you're seeing in the corpus?
Yeah, so in the slide that we are sharing here, we are just suggesting a few searches because sometimes it takes time till we become familiar with the types of text we have in the corpus to actually think of terms that we would like to look at. So these are some of the suggestions. So you are also more than welcome to ask any questions about the search process and the results that you see.
And I just wanted to quickly add that with a lot of the searches that we've done, they are usually, as you can see, there's some kind of a juxtaposition, right? So we have, in Russian, we have Ruski язык versus по-русски, and that's usually what students, find difficult to distinguish between the use of those. So we provide them with a concordance, concordance lines for both, and direct them to notice patterns and see, if they can notice the patterns that we're directing them to.
Michelle says, how can students tell which word is correctly used and which one is not without teacher help? That usually is going to show in the pattern, right? Because we're going to have many concordance lines showing one pattern, and then one is slightly different. So one of your questions can be to direct the students to that concordance line that reads this and that, and then ask, for example, how is that one different from the other ones? What do you think it's the problem with that example? Something like that. For example, in Portuguese, we have grammatical gender agreement. So sometimes this can be confusing as it's not the same in Spanish or something the like. And then that's a good question. For example, you were driving their attention to a language pattern, but then you notice that there is a gender agreement that it's not correct. You can have like a final question. Now pay attention to this line. So regarding gender agreement, what do you think it's not correct there? So that's one way of doing that.
And I would also add to that, the whole idea behind the inductive approach is it is to teach students, differences between specific items, right, whether lexical or grammatical, but also to really teach them the skill of noticing and language awareness as well. So being, more attentive to language that people use or they use. So,
and that's why we use Google Sites and other platforms to embed not only the concordance lines, but also instructions. And we do make use of that text feature a lot, like to actually add extensive instructions on how to do this and what to notice and your questions. And that's in the slide, what questions would you ask, right? That's how you guide students to discover patterns. But with that being said, our research has shown that teachers, they do have to negotiate meeting with students, especially when they're introducing this type of activity. So live, and we've been teaching online during COVID. So in live classes or face-to-face classes, of course, that's easier to do because the teacher is mediating that, right? And for asynchronous class or materials that the students access by themselves, then having that text in the introduction, and we are studying ways actually to make those instructions clearer, right? How do you guide students to actually notice those patterns and use concordance lines?
We also have one of the filters that we have in the interface when you're making search, is to search for draft. So some assignments, for example, in the actual course, students made 2 drafts of the essay, for example, of the composition. So another way of working with mistakes in the corpus is to make searches with both drafts, and then they're going to see the same text written by the same excerpt written by the same student. So then you can draw their attention to that, for example. So what did they change from draft 1 to draft 2? Why did they make that change? something like that. That's another possibility.
And just to reiterate, sorry, Alex, you can, when you're doing the embedding, you can choose what you're searching, right? And we often do this. We search for expressions that we know we want students to use. So if maybe you don't want to do the non-native like language awareness process, you can customize your search to search only the concordance lines you want students to base their pattern noticing on.
And I'm just gonna start responding to Michelle. She had a question. Do you think it's possible to distinguish right from wrong by using a tag during the stage of building the site? So that was not, I mean, it's definitely possible, but that was not our intent. And we do, I mean, as crazy as it's going to sound, we do want to expose learners to all kinds of language, right? And they are already exposed in the classroom, right? So like when they talk to each other in pairs or groups, right, they use the language, and that's the language that they use that we've recorded in the corpus. So they are already exposed, and they actually, I mean, from my experience, students actually love looking for mistakes in the corpus. They can tell right from wrong very easily because they feel proud. They feel proud that, oh, we're not going to make those mistakes. Yeah. But, you know, and it's again a process, right? So, and kind of teaching that skill of being able to tell, right? Because we're inundated with information everywhere. Like everything on the internet that they search is not necessarily going to be, you know, they have to learn how to tell right from wrong, right? And so, or what is even, you know, right or wrong, right? So like they have to have those critical skills of looking at the data and making a decision for themselves what they want to do with it.
And sometimes the right from wrong, having a tag, we would be making a decision that maybe not everyone would agree with, right? So annotating a corpus for errors or non-native like, it's up for discussion, right? Some things I say like, no, you can never say that, but who, according to whom, right? So I'll say it's like, again, going to that known deficit perspective of language is what people use, right? And yes, you can turn to native speaker corpora, but at the same time, it's not always, even so, it's not always that black and white.
And just one last comment, if we think about it, I was recently watching a podcast, well, listening to a podcast about English and the loss of grammatical gender in English, right? And how did that happen? Well, because the Vikings were non-native speakers of English, and they were butchering the gender, right? Because the gender didn't, in Old English and in, I'm blanking on the language that they spoke, didn't coincide, right? So that really led the fact that non-native speakers were using a language non-standardly, right? Led to the whole led to the grammatical gender being redundant, basically, right? So
and it's also a matter of providing the context. So where are these texts? Where, in which conditions they were written, by whom? Not in a sense to disempower our learners, but in a sense to contextualize. If we think of a feature in English, for example, like as for third person singular. So we learn in the class that you have to add as, like she wants, he wants, it wants. But then you go to lyrics, music lyrics, for example, and sometimes there's no as in third person singular. So and students are exposed to that, right? To music, songs, and lyrics out there. So how do you distinguish that? Because you discuss that you have a context for music lyrics that make it possible for you to work with other varieties of the language that might be non-standard and might not be appropriate in your academic essay, for example. So that's the same thing, like language, the varieties of language are already out there. So it's more of a matter of contextualizing and critically thinking about those features than not exposing students to them. And also, I think we have a tendency of thinking that by them being exposed to one non-standard or non-established feature is going to stick to them forever. But it's not like that, because the standard ones also do not stick. Like once you were once exposed to that, do not like stick forever. So we have to be constantly exposed to language, right? So I think it's a matter of being critical and raising this awareness in them on how to search for language and how to be exposed to language and know what the context is, what the purpose is, what the genre of that text is, what is the audience. So all of that can come into the discussion when we are working with learner data.
Yeah, it's interesting that this type of debate is always so heated. But I just want to emphasize that the L2 identity is something that was very important when we were analyzing this data and working with the students, because they see themselves in those texts. So it's not about the errors, it's about what they can do. And they see that they can do a lot. They see those examples and they are like, okay, this is a lot of Portuguese and I can produce this. So it's, we tend to focus on the errors, but in fact, there are many, many texts that don't have that many errors, that have no errors at all. So they just identify with what they can do. And this is something very nice. And I just want to quickly jump to Mohammed's question, because I know we are almost done with our time. And I think it's such an interesting question. And he asked if, what else other than grammar features can you look at in the written and speech text? And can we get insights from the corpus about intercultural competence, for example, like certain pragmatic features? So I think certainly we can get into grammatic features, but when I read your question, actually, Mohammed, it came to my mind one of the activities that Alex created for the Russian, from the Russian corpus, and they were discussing food, and they were comparing differences between American and Russian food. So that was one example.
So I actually shared the webinar series. So this is an asynchronous webinar series where we actually address like first lexicogrammar, but also register and genre and culture. So I'll put that in the chat too. I put it in the Q&A, but this gives you some other examples of how the corpora can be used for these other types of questions.
Yeah, so you'll see the slides will be available. They are already available in Circle's page, and they're going to find everything that we share with you, and also additional resources. The last slide is a list of other resources and other types of activities that you can embed into your website.
All right, so like our presenters just said, we've reached the end of today's webinar, and I would like to thank all of you for giving such an interesting presentation on the materials that you've been developing for the past few years now, and the ways actually that you've been using them in the classroom and giving ideas to our audience about how they could go about that. So thank you also to our participants for raising some very interesting questions. And as we wrap up, I want to remind everyone who is here on today that next Saturday we will have our last Circle webinar for this academic year, and just want to wish everybody a good rest of the weekend and summer, hopefully.
Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you, everybody, for coming
Really
from all
nice
over
to
the
see
world.
everyone.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone,
Very
for joining
awesome.
us.
Thank you so much.
It's possibly, I mean, I don't know, you were mentioning that the development of these two corpora, both in Portuguese and Russian. Do you see where else there might be a big need? I think, for English and French, that's pretty much covered, I think. But do you see other pockets that might be interesting to look at, and especially based on how these languages are growing? I'm thinking also maybe like Chinese or
I was gonna say we've definitely had interest in that, and there's actually a couple of students here even that are working on it, but it's the issue is it is a lot of time, and so you really want to think do you have grant funding, or is this something that you're going to do your dissertation on, because that certainly was the case with our corpora. So yeah.
And also the speech data, it's a little bit different, right? Because for the written data it's already written, it's already typed. But the spoken one, you want to make sure that you have at least an orthographic transcription to make searches. So yeah, that's very time consuming, but it's also very interesting. So
yeah. Yes, Mariana and I are working on a spoken corpus project.
I was wondering for this project, or obviously you've been using this with your own students, right? I was wondering, when things hopefully go back to normal, whether you might be able to videotape a lesson. I think just for the purpose of, the people who are interested in this project or participants like in a webinar like this, it might be interesting for them to see how you actually use this in the context of a classroom, a particular lesson, maybe see students' reaction or how they go about the searches and some of the difficulties they might be encountering. I'm not meaning to give you
no, I love this
work, but I was just
Thank
thinking,
you.
just because of the questions that kept popping up and things like that, it might be interesting to show, if students raise a question about an error because that came up, right? So how do you handle that in class, or something like this? But that might be something, a couple lessons, maybe one in Russian, another one in Portuguese for now, and showing how you go about this, and maybe where do you incorporate it, right?
I was going to say that we're already collecting some of that information through surveys and teacher perceptions and student perceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know that from that research, I know that Mariana and Valentina created videos, and Bruna, I think, for some of those questions that instructors had.
yeah, we're definitely. Oh, go ahead.
I think it's related to this, and maybe that's something you're going to bring up too, Mari. It's that maybe we don't need to wait for the in-person classes, because our research also showed that teachers who were teaching synchronously had a better response from students because they were able to get those questions from the synchronous classes too. So we actually do have these two environments to already
and it also
record
affects,
a Zoom class. That would be nice.
Yeah,
and it also affects the design of the activities. For example, some of them that I designed was for fully asynchronous course. So then you have much more typed in the instructions. So now pay attention to those examples. What can you see? What they have in common? So you have to go guiding. And then when you are in person or synchronously, then you can more of a discussion out of that. So it does affect the design of the activity. But I think that's true, Dr. Dupuy, that like maybe the next follow-up that people want to see, since we gave two on the affordances of the corpus, is the implementation part. Discussions on the implementation part, on how to conduct that kind of discussion. I think that would be very interesting for a third workshop.
Yeah, it's just, I think oftentimes, especially if people are new to something, there is a need to see, okay, well, or at least it builds their confidence of doing it. And maybe, you yourself, because you've been using it for a while, you may still stumble sometimes, or there may be things that happen that students raise and you were not expecting that. And I think just doing that kind of builds people's confidence to use the tool, right?
Yes.
I think it's one thing to see the activities that you've developed, but it's another to see them actually implemented in the classroom. And that's what I was thinking as questions.
Yeah, and I do think we have some nice affordances of the online environment in that we have the student answers to show like how they're interacting with the materials asynchronously. We've already used some of that with Crow too. Because we're doing basically the same thing in the first year writing, and we are also doing observations. So it's just that step further of, and I have videotapes of synchronous online classes, but just getting that permission to share that would be the next step. So I thank you for the suggestion.
I was just thinking about this.
I think it's great. It's true. Like when you're training teachers, if you could see like what is happening in the classroom, that's so helpful.
And especially because you've developed some activities. I mean, and you could actually have, okay, so this is the activity itself, how it was built, and so on. And then next to it, you know, show the live implementation, whether it's in person or online. And then I think that that is really useful for someone who might be new or just, you know, very novice at using that kind of tool and approach to language teaching. So, yeah.
And with the instructors of our programs, the Portuguese and the Russian programs, we do have these meetings and focus groups that we do, or workshops just for them that we do every semester. So with them, we have been able to follow up and see, they give us feedback on what's not working and what was an issue, either with the design or the implementation part. So yeah, definitely that's very interesting, because most of the things we encounter when we actually implement it.
Right, exactly. And it kind of demystifies, right? I think the process, and that, you know, even with years of experience, you're still running into things, and you know how. So, yeah.
For the online environment, we created the screencasts, both for the instructor to have a guide on how to implement the activity, and an introduction for the students to understand first what a corpus is, what MACAWS is, where the texts come from. So we are trying on different ways of contextualizing those activities, because it's very, yeah, to work with corpus itself can be very overwhelming on a first approach. But that's one of the benefits of the learner corpora, right? That it's already less overwhelming because it's their context, their topic,
right.
Familiar or close to familiar vocabulary. So that's already a huge benefit compared to other type of corpora.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's true for all technologies, right? New technologies, when you're introducing them to the language classroom. It's how to actually help people to get buy-in, right? And
I was just going to respond to one question, because Julio, thank you so much for your engagement and all of your questions, and joining from Honduras. So I just wanted to respond because you were talking about a lack of technology in your context. So I wanted to let you know, so somebody has to have access, but if you, it's the teacher, have access, then you can actually create paper-based materials for your students from the corpus. And we have examples of that in the Circle webinar series that I shared earlier in the chat. I'll share that again. It's actually in the Q&A as well. So those actually, and they link out to some activities that we developed early on that are paper-based. So at least for your students, they wouldn't need the access to the technology. They could use those in the classroom as handouts or on a screen that you would, you know, project.
Yes, actually, I know what IDDL was born from those paper-based materials we had.
Yeah, and it's a good way to kind of scaffold to the IDDL too, because, you know, then you have even more control over the activity and what you're putting in that activity. So